This one also is actually a pretty nice day trade, to be honest, like after coming back around. IBM is kind of just holding the line. Intel was good on the reversal back up. I don't know if anyone traded that today, but this one, where's my chart on Intel? Right here. This one was really clean off the 102.20 holds off INTC, so this could easily come back to like those mid ratio highs, and you could look for 120 this week on Intel, especially if NVIDIA reports good earnings. Apple's kind of still stuck within these ranges, exactly between that 300.52. That's exactly where it stalled this morning. Okay. Plug came back to that 322. This is also not a bad day trade. And then now back to that 338. So a lot of these are kind of just, they filled down but returned right back to their means of support. Tesla's back over that 390.92. So no breaks on Tesla beneath that 392 to 93, which is good because 389 is a major support for that. But it's back over 401 on Tesla. Find my Tesla template. I don't remember what template it's on. It might be this one here. Yeah, it is. This is a huge support area for Tesla. So this is what could basically take it back to this 410, 412, okay, this range in here, whoever's trading Tesla. Obviously a very volatile name to trade, but when that thing gets going, it gets moving pretty quickly. And then ES kind of just right back in here. So I think everything's honestly pretty straightforward, if you ask me. Like everything is pretty, I think for today's session, I feel like it was very straightforward. It just, sometimes people complicate things a little bit more than they have to. So also just be very cautious, you guys, because I feel like a lot of people are also forgetting that like the index and Amazon and Tesla and all these names, like a lot of them having like these options that expire same day or next day too is also causing obviously a lot of volatility with the market too. So it's just something to make sure that you're looking at when you're buying contracts these days, because I feel like a lot of people are forgetting that, and then it just puts them back in like a major area of risk. Crude also is still testing that 104, 107. Hasn't tested 107 yet, but that's still another factor that we're paying attention to. We have our crude hedge that we bought on Friday. I had to rebuy since I didn't have anything further dated. Some of the oil names like XOM, I did say this area in here was going to be probably a big overhead this week. So far it's, I don't know if you guys can see this. Do you see that? Like off these structural lows, it's kind of sitting right above this 161, so you can easily mark these if you want. This is where there would likely be some mid-range overhead on XOM. So it's kind of like, you see how oil is not around 107, 106, it's closer to 104, 103. Same thing with XOM. 163 to 164 is more calculated, but probably getting a little bit stuck in between here first, okay? Like off these ranges in here. So this one is still pushing a bit though. And ES still stalling here a little bit, right around that 210. So 210 was the first calculated point here to retest 74.11, 74.10. They did tag 74.10, so I would mark that. And then immediately selling off, meaning that they're reducing range probably to delay until this period here. This was the period that was very crucial for back test around this 230 to 236. Okay, so there's some extensions here. Poet had some July calls. I mean, the contracts are still fairly inexpensive, even for like the 14 or 13s for this week. If they were to like doji and come back around or something tomorrow. Tesla's holding up pretty good. I picked up some Tesla calls when it held that 402.67. I will cover those end of day if this doesn't get back, I would say over probably like that 406, 407 area. But so far it's looking constructive. I'm just going to put some alerts around here. I think that's where they stalled pre-market. Where did they stall? I think it already took out highs from real time here. Yeah, it did. It's trying to base above. The thing is Tesla doesn't really have too much calculated range between 404 and 410. Hence this area is kind of, do you see how it's like filled down and that there's a huge gap here, and then when they broke up they like retraced it right up? It's because there isn't that much demand in this area here as there is around like 410, 412. So it's kind of to see if they're going to break this all the way through or if they're going to come back and stall it around this range in here. And then ES still kind of stuck within this box. Like I said earlier, this is the same sort of balance zone. This is a rebalancing area. So kind of like the duration of time it took between down here, okay, to finally come and clear this range. It took literally almost 2 hours. So technically speaking, from the time that they took out 73, 96, and 99, it could take about 2 hours. So when I was looking at this, the first range was around an hour and 45 minutes. So that hour 45 minutes would be around here, versus that 2 hours and 4 minutes is right around here. So that also makes sense from this kind of approach. Okay, that if they're going to clear or break, it's probably not until around this point in the day. And that's what could keep this basically back and forth, because we have some risk to here. Okay, I'm gonna make some coffee, guys. I'll be right back. All right, this is pretty expected, especially after that 74.11 stall. I would say though that that condition at this 210 period was met, so we can mark that, and 210 was linked to those earlier odds. Let me just go back and double check. 210 was linked to that 55, 110, 121, 55. These were the 1125, 1220, 115. Okay, these were linked to like those 115 odds back in here. Okay, remember we said that? So this 210, that was basically the retest of that 215. Okay, off that 55 minute, which obviously had some point basis in between here around like that 1220. 22 minute I think was that 232. So this is the more important period, guys, because they did tag, while they did tag that 74.10, 74.11 at that time. Okay, it's super crucial now because they have odds of retesting the bottom of the zone basically by that 232, 230. Okay, so kind of like what we were talking about earlier. These are specifically linked like pretty close to those early highs. I don't know if you guys can see this. You can see that reduction stick that happened at 126. So these are more bear-like periods, if that makes sense. Can you guys hear me? So like you see how at this period here they came, retraced 11, okay, 10. This is like basically weekly like opening range off this point here. Then they lost it here even though they ended up closing above off that 26 stick. So there was some reductions here. Notice back in here they came and then they tried reclaiming that 74.04. Then right in here at that 209, 210, do you see how they tried their best to reclaim 74.10, like basically weekly open? So these points in time are linked with those weekly opening ranges, okay? Is everyone on the same page? Like specifically off here and off these structural supports. So failing to continue, which clearly they stalled here on that second stick, would imply that they would break it back down to 7. I figure there's probably going to be support around 9495 before that there's support around 9299 personally. So like I felt like they could try holding this area here first and then try pushing up. That's just my thoughts. So I figured that 9495 could hold first. And then we can look to see if they'll try reclaiming during that 232, 236, 238 windows. Let me just reset this because this is the risk below, okay? And you can clearly see that there's a bit of a slight bear flag that formed, but that's what these structures are, and this is what could make us at major risk of heading back to 73, 76, 78, 81, okay, on like a core failure. So negating the structure and negating it pretty quickly, I would say is very, very, very important. But I would also say because those conditions were met off 115, 210, that they do have a chance of negating that. 305 is the mid flip here. So we could maybe look for, I like this time frame too because it's linked to 4 o'clock. What's the mid range between 210 and 305? Probably right here. So I think that they'll hold personally off 9495. That was my thoughts, but we'll see. This is kind of like the area of risk that I figured they would probably take it to. So where's that 210 period? 210 and 305. So roughly like 26 and a half, 27 minutes, probably right in here. Okay, this is the midpoint. So I already had 330, 235, 236 marked, but this is the midpoint here, okay? Around 237, 238. And we already were watching that 240, 241 period. Remember what we were saying earlier? What they do at these points in time are correlated to real-time odds, those white lines. So if they end up giving up the range and giving up the zone, like this area here, at this point in time, we know our odds are extremely reduced, right? Does that make sense? If they break us all the way back down here at these points in time, we have very low odds of basically seeing any higher than where we hit in real time today. If they're able to sustain during this point in time, and at the very least, I would say off of like the 9495, like retract back over 740506. Okay, ideally 7411, which right now doesn't really look that probable. Then we would negate major risk, but we'd probably still have a chance of staying within this balance zone. Does that make sense? In real time. So we'll give this a few more minutes. Tesla's been holding off pretty good despite ES selling off a little bit. So what do you guys think? Do you think that they hold the line here where I figured they could at 7394 and retest 7411? 7411 retest by that 3 or 238 to 242. What time is this? 48 period. I'll set that for 2 minutes for you guys to vote. And the risk below would be obviously back to retesting 7390, 7388, which you can think of this as the real-time session open, real-time session odds against session open for the week, okay? That's kind of what it's battling right now, is 7411 and 7386. Does that make sense? You're basically stuck in between here, okay? Between these areas here. Okay. And that's what would put you at risk of heading back to 7778. Even if we were to reduce this, like, pole from the fib back to 78, because that's what these structures are formed at. Okay, do you see how if we measure from there, that's also where it's currently holding. Do you see this? That's where it's currently holding right here. Off 74 10. Okay, does that make sense? So they're still giving a slight 50% odd, okay? Off a 9-4 hold. Does that make sense to you guys or no? Like, this is a really good way of measuring structure and risk, technically. So obviously if you fail to hold 9-4, your odds of getting back to 7-8 obviously start increasing, okay? And that was the area that we really had to break this afternoon for this structure break to occur, was back over our 7-8, 8-1, 8-3, okay? So that's kind of where the battle is right here. And then this would be like a lower support risk, close to 9-3. And this is why technically they could take it down to 90-91 and then still potentially hold, but then we would have very low odds of like extended range in real time. Okay, so if they could keep it zone bound above 8890, but then stuck beneath 7410. Does that make sense? So if they kept it in this range in here, like this orange range, obviously we're not going to really have the best odds for real time. If they kept it in between here, in this yellow box range, then we could still have some odds, but we'd be pretty restricted. And these were the points in time that are linked to real time. So these white boxes linked to real time odds. Okay, so if they really want to stall and reduce range in real time, it's going to be linked to these periods here. Okay. Tesla starting to stall a little bit too. So which area do you think will be the trickiest, especially at this time of day? And this is really, really good because this is reacting exactly how these zones would normally react, right? So today's pretty straightforward because we're stuck in the zone, and we already know that any breaks above 14.15, PA would become more progressive. Anything stuck in this yellow orange zone, market's still at risk. So let's see. 73, 94, 95 being tested exactly at that 240, 241 period that we were talking about earlier. This heavily reduces odds for real time, okay? Because this area here is linked to 74.11, 74.10. Does that make sense to you guys? We'll have to see if they can bring this back to at least here, okay? Like 04, 05. Your odds can slightly increase. Does that make sense? And maybe not by much, but at least so that they can maybe take it back to like 74.14, 74.18. Do you guys understand this concept or no? Because this is, I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's not hard, but I feel like a lot of people will trade very poorly in this area here because they'll expect a lot more than the market's going to give. Kind of like what they expected down here. This is very similar, okay? So remember I said it could last the exact same duration of time that it took from the first initial back test of 6.1, 6.2, 5.5, 5.6 until it finally cleared 7.6, 7.7, 7.8, okay? And that initially took around 123 bars, so like roughly 2 hours, okay? From the actual lows here, it took around an hour and 37 minutes. So I already know from the time that they broke above 9495 back in here, it was linked to here, an hour and, or 2 hours and 3 minutes is close to where we're trading right in here, okay? And this is why I think during this period they kind of have to make up their mind in terms of whether they want to break beneath 9394. Okay, take this back to these core areas here if they want to try holding the line. So, and it's specifically around these points in time. The most calculated odds for today's session was between that 254, 255, 3, 301, and 305 period. Do we have any catalysts happening at that time of day by chance? I actually didn't check that, but that's the most confluence for today's session is during that period. So we could see some recovery sticks then, I guess. I didn't see anything though. So there might be maybe like news or something around that time. 255, 3, 301. Did you guys see anything or no? Those are the most important times of the session. Because those are linked to the entire session. These are more linked to like the real-time session. Okay, so then maybe we see some stick breaks or something. Okay, let me start cleaning this up a bit. So some things I noticed, 232 did retrace 73.98.99. And then this retraced 74.102, which is not bad at 235. But then you could see the immediate reduction sticks at 236, 237. And then the 240, 41 are holding off of 9495. But that's going to put very high pressure for these sticks here to retrace a minimum of 99. And obviously, ideally back over like 02, 03. I would say over 05, but I think that's going to be a little bit hard unless we get some bigger range sticks or something kind of similar to this. Okay? And then if they end up holding the line, then that would mean that they want to avoid going back to 73.70s. Okay? And keep it stuck within this range. Which also isn't the most exciting PA, but otherwise the more that they keep risk on for this period here, then they're still at that risk of the zone backtest to not. The area is closer to like 9.1, like in here, which we can mark, and 9.2, but we can just say 8.8. I think Tesla has momentum. It's just ES stalling is obviously working against it. But anyway, Tesla's never been one to follow the theme of the market anyway, so. And Apple's following super close to how ES is trading too, kind of just stuck within 297.61 but beneath 299. And that's the same thing after tagging that 300.52 spot. I think it tagged it almost to the exact penny this morning. Yeah, it did. Stalled at 5.1. Okay. So just be a little bit cautious, guys, during these time intervals. Obviously, make sure you had covered at least something at 73.99, 74.06, 74.11. Those were really, really big areas for us in general, but and specifically when they ended up stalling. So I did mention earlier this morning that they could easily get this back to the zone and get it back to our balance area, but it's very clear that they stalled 74.14, 74.11, okay? So there was a slight break above, which I think is what could help us avoid the zone. That's another reason why, by the way, I feel like they could hold above 8.8 closer to these ranges, is because they did technically break this 11 spot and this 10 spot by roughly 4 to 5 points, okay? Which could technically help us like sustain these areas by like 4 to 5 points, or like the 7.883 areas by 4 to 5 points. If they did something like that, it would basically take us back to like the daily open. So we'll see. This is the most important, I think, testing area for the session this afternoon. After the 5.46158 test would be here around this 93, 94, 90, 95, 99. And these are the times that are linked to real time too, so don't forget, because these being linked to real time is what decreases odds of range, okay, for the real time session today. So 247, 248, 248 was that calculated time, and you can clearly see that they're breaking a little bit beneath that 9495, but holding above 92. So we'll see if they can try closing at least over this 94 area here at this time, and then immediately negating, okay, and bringing it back maybe to these ranges in here at these points. They'll still keep these odds in play, but I think that makes it so that we likely doji the session. This is a very calculated time for real time, okay? So there, you see how they're trying their best to keep it around 9.5, you guys? Look at that. That's insane. That's crazy, okay? Because 9.5 is very calculated. Same with 9.4. So 73, 95. I don't know if you can see that. 95.25 close. And that's for a real-time hold. They're trying to avoid heading back to the 70s and probably keeping this pinnable, but they need some progression within this next period here. Okay, so between that 254, 255, this is the odds for the session to retract and retrace, okay? Otherwise, if they'll break down range, and that would break it back down to 73, 71, 73, 75, 73, 78. I think that they have a pretty good chance of holding after retracing 9.5. I'm looking to see if they can get back to 74.0350. Probably by that 254.55. Otherwise, they'd be at risk of that 73.88 retest. In order for this to negate risk, I think that they have to try getting back above here by this 305 window. Otherwise, that risk can stay on for technically these ranges in here, but and there were those really nasty looking structures that don't really flip until 305. So this is still active, okay? And I think this is about half the range. So It's another reason to kind of see the risk that they're putting on right here. Do you see that? And then from like an open low structure, do you guys see this? Open close, open low. Okay. Do you see how there's a ton of support in this area here? And then these are also the midpoints. Okay? Between those time intervals would be right around here. That's just a different way of looking at this from a structural perspective. And 210 was very calculated because that was the point in time that they did retract back to weekly open. Okay? And these were the calculated points in time for the session today. These were the most important time intervals. Were at 254.55, 301, and then this 305. So what kind of PA do we need to have happen here? What do you guys think? What would have to happen here, especially off these ranges? And specifically with huge risk, obviously, around these spots. What do you think would have to happen here? Because otherwise, don't forget, these are linked back to these, basically where the structure broke, which kind of resets us and puts us back at risk of 73.50s retesting. Okay. Which I'm marking these because there are calculated spots, otherwise I don't really care, but 5-8, 5-4, 6-1 are calculated. So are 7-6, 7-8, 7-9. Otherwise, they could also just turn it recyclable. Brendan made a really good comment earlier, and he wasn't necessarily wrong. It's just in a different range. So something he said earlier, which I'll talk about after this period here, because I just want to see what they do off the 90 and 88 spot, because I think failing the zone here is what would essentially have a stop set at Tesla break even. So. Is what would essentially trigger that volatility. They open around this range in here today. 8 would be like the zone hold. So you can already see the volatility off 53 though. So 53 still stayed in the zone, but beneath that 90, 91. 54 is calculated and also a major flip. Same with 55. This actually made for a pretty nice short off 74.11 too if you wanted to do a hedge. I was going to say something Brendan said earlier was and it wasn't wrong, it was just the wrong ranges. But it's something that could happen this afternoon. I just trying to find what he said. Okay, he was saying earlier, I think you can get a flush down back to channel and probably close back in this area. So like close back in this area here. This is also probable, but on the inverse, okay? So like a 74, 73.99, 74.11 balance area retest. Okay, it's the same thing because 7354, 7361 is also a balance area. Does that make sense? And they could basically return it back to the midpoint, which would be back in these ranges in here. Okay, like back in this area in here. Okay, that's if they want to keep it stuck, basically, like at core areas. And that keeps it basically stuck in between, is another way of thinking about this. Because if we measure this from, let's say, 3.8, okay, like this area here, to 5.4, okay, this is kind of a midpoint. If we look at this from R21 to 5.4, this is a midpoint, okay? If we look at this to where they stalled, okay, which is around 74.15 to lows, like 73.53, 54, okay, this is a midpoint. If we look at this off our 74.11, 74.10 area, okay, do you see how this would be the midpoint in here? Do you guys see this or no? Like, this is kind of like, this is basically a mid-range, okay? Which was our initial weekly support. This is like, this is the median between 7354 to 74.11, basically, is in these 80s. Okay? Did you guys see that stick break at 255? I don't know if you guys can see this. Let me reset my chart. Look at that. This is a very, very, very calculated time, okay? And specifically for taking out or retesting opening range. Remember how I said that these are linked to 738675, okay? Look at that. 738675 taken out off that 255 stick, which is what puts that risk back for 7871 back in play. These are also the mid ranges around 81, 82 off 74.11 and 73.54. So what do you think they'd have to retrace here, specifically by 3, 301, 304? What would they have to retrace to negate risk of going any lower than this weekly support area that I initially had set around 7381, 7883? 88 plus is too low. That's too low. That's not high enough. To reduce risk entirely, I feel like that's not high enough. At least I would say 9495. Basically back to these points here, okay? This and this. Okay? All right, what do you guys think? Who here thinks that they're gonna hold the line? Okay, off these ranges down here, and who here thinks that they're gonna sell this back off to the means, which would be taking it basically back into these core areas, but potentially back to 54, 61, 63, 66, or making it digestive between 7.1, 7.4, 7.8, 8.1, basically beneath 8.8 but above 5.4. Because if they're going to try retracing, it has to be during this period here. You're not wrong about 8.8. Like, I do think that that's the minimum, at least for this period, probably would be to get back over 8.8. But I think by like 305, if this thing's still beneath like 9495, then that's still a huge risk. So let's see. This is where you'd probably want to see at least a retracement of today's open, 7386.75. Do you see this? And that's why I don't think that 88 is enough. That's enough to like maybe reduce it a bit on the downside, but not enough to reduce the actual risk. That's an immediate rejection here too. 73.88 tagged off 3 o'clock, but closed. Actually, no, it didn't. It stalled 8775. 88 tagged off that 301, but then stalling here. So we would need that 02, 03, 04 sticks. This here, that 305 that's not a calculated flip. This is linked to this time frame. Okay, so that's the time that this window finally closes. Okay, so that would make 03, 02, 04 very important, because that they still have time to retest the lows until 305, 304. Does that make sense? Which is this 73, 78, which so far they're holding. Okay, this area in here. Does that make sense? That's not very much time. This was a really nice bear structure that played out, especially off these stalls. And really good short hedges. That 55-minute was money. I really liked it because it included that 210 period and the 235 period, and it included the break after 301, 3 o'clock. So it kind of gave like a good visual for both. So this is the very clear overhead here. Okay. Do you see what I mean? I think the range is equal on both sides. And I think if they, yeah, even Tesla had some relative strength back to 404. I think if they, this isn't bad on Intel too. I think if they hold the line, I also was watching oil. XOM hit my target of that 162.69 for anyone that's trading that. And CL is back near highs off that 104.89. So these were some other factors that were coming into play here with ES. So less than a minute left for this to take out 73.7875. I feel like that's not going to happen. They'll probably try taking it back to retest maybe 88. And I don't think that really changes anything. It just kind of makes it so that they'll probably keep this pinnable, because then they could just turn this into like a inside bar period from here until close, because this flips at 4. Okay, so do you guys understand that concept? Like basically this would be to reduce or to increase odds of upside. This would help increase odds of downside. Them keeping it right in between here does what? What does this do? What does this do if they're keeping it right in between? Yeah, probably just keeps us stuck, I think. Like basically between core areas, opening range, and then like the lower zone. Which could essentially come back and continue to burn premiums this afternoon. And keep that scenario in play of like that daily doji that we talked about, which I thought had the highest odds, but I do think though, like to reduce some of this risk though, they probably at least need like back to like this area here, like 04, 06, 99, okay? And then that would just kind of keep it pinnable into the close at the zone. That was my thoughts for today's session. I didn't really think that we had high odds of an outside bar or high odds of taking out 7350s. I figured they'd probably just keep this within this balance area here. I think keeping it in this area here though doesn't really do anything for us. Like this area in here, this doesn't really do anything for us. So I would like them to get it back in the zone. Okay, those afternoon odds that we had this afternoon after this period here, this was the bear period. So now that that's over with, oh, they disappeared. Where did they go? Did I not mark them on here? Do you guys remember what they were? $3.36. Oh, the bot had it recorded. Okay, $3.36. These were some of like the later afternoon odds. The 56-minute was linked to low of day. This one was the one that's linked to like that 10:48. This one flips over at 3:28. So I mean, we could even watch to see if this time frame reverses a little bit back up in here, like maybe at least back above this area here, like 7389.91. And then off those early highs that we had earlier, like the 83-minute, I think we looked at the 97. These were linked to high of day. So these are the ones that could come back and flag, and they don't flip until end of session, okay? So these are the ones that they're kind of like in between. This flips at 4:08, so this is if they wanted to try engulfing this period. Outside bar, 4:08 p.m. Okay. That means, can someone measure this for us? The midpoint between 2:45 and 4:08. And then I think we also looked at the 97-minute, if I'm not mistaken. And this is the one that kind of, like I said, could go inside. Okay, so this is the one that could keep us stuck inside, whereas the other one could maybe give us a break by like that 4:08 period, but maybe we can measure the midpoints there. Okay, so these are the ones that we were watching earlier. So this here and this here. Let's see. That's some pretty good PA, guys, after the 73.81 hold. So I think covering shorts here was probably a good call, especially around that 301 period. I'm just going to quickly measure this to see what this midpoint is in here between 245 and this 408, just to kind of see if there's maybe some odds, so maybe off like a 41.5 minute or something, if there's some odds maybe around here. I think that's close to like the 324, 325, this period here, like basically right around imbalance prints. So imbalance prints has some good odds. Okay, I think in order for that to be the case, we have to be back around that 74. Like if they want to engulf this, I think we have to try pushing here back over 73.99, maybe by like the midpoint of this. So median would be between that 301 and here. So 28 minutes. So 14-minute period, so here, like around 3:14. Is there news coming out, you guys, after these holds here? These were our initial weekly supports off these areas, so I really didn't think that they would want to take that down. They probably, if they hold and retrace 8-8, that gave us at least an odd of getting back within this zone range or balance area, but 9-5 I think is a little bit more important. So far, follow through after 305 has been really good though. So what do you guys think? You think that they'll engulf this within that time frame, or you think that they're likely going to keep this stuck? So let's measure the range it took between there and when they had initially broke. That was that 2 hours and 4 minutes, I think we said. And from highs, that's around here. So yeah, that makes sense. That's right around this point in here. And around this point in here from when they broke 9-9 off these lows. Do you guys see that? Right around here. It's around this window. So off highs, it would be right around that 327, 28, 29. So very important window for like mid point of 3 o'clock before imbalance prints come out. In here. Okay, these are linked with these areas in here. So my thoughts are if they can clear 9-9 as early as this 314.15, then this sets up odds pretty good for the 74.11 retest during this period here. I don't know if we'll engulf, but maybe. If they wanted to engulf and get us to 74.21, that would be the best case scenario. What time frame was that? Technically, they could even engulf this one off the 56 minute. This is linked to low of day. They would have to take out the 11 spot, I guess. And 04. Who wants to measure this one here? This is one of the earliest, it's not for high breaks, but maybe for like 74.11 to 12 retest. I think the midpoint is right around the point that they held. So you can measure this one in 25 to 75% time intervals. So this would be like the midpoint. Do you see that? Like basically half of 55, 56. Okay, is around 27 to 28 minutes, so these points here. And then, oops. And then a fraction of that would be the 14-minute intervals. So I think right here, it's around these points here. Okay. This and this. Can someone document this? I don't have the mic turned on Discord. Izzy thinks that if they're able to clear 73.99, specifically around this 414 period, there's a chance that they could engulf the session. At a minimum, if they engulfed us back to 73, what is this? 73 or 74, sorry, 74. 13.50 by 327, 328, then we have odds of still getting to 74.20s today. And it's mainly off this 314 stick. It's a calculated midpoint and a mid interval on multiple accounts. This is 75% of the range, and this is also that mid range from what I was watching earlier. So there's kind of double the confluence here. That's a calculated time at 3:14. 73.99 retraced at 3:14 p.m. That's back in the balance zone. Which gives odds of getting back to this area here. I'm just going to mark the 70, what did I say it was? 7407.75 and 7413.50. Okay. All right, what do you guys think? There's some decent odds here because of what they did at 414 or 314. They don't necessarily have to do it by this point because we have those odds till 408 for like retesting in the high of day, but so that would be after the bell. But let's just see what you guys think. Clear 7408, 7411 by 3:28 p.m. I'll set that for 2 minutes since there's not that much time. That would give us probably the highest odds of getting back into this area here. Okay, but otherwise they'll keep this within like this neutral range. I think they're going to keep this neutral, to be honest, but I'm wrong sometimes. I'm not always right about overall direction, but that's just how I'm reading this. And then that other time frame we looked at is the one that could give us an outside break by end of session today, basically, okay? Or like 4:08 p.m. The worst case scenario is if they left this as a doji, okay? If they left this as a doji and then broke range between 4:08 and 5 p.m., that's a different story, but that's why I think these points in time are very important because, like I said earlier, the midpoint between 3:45 and this 4:08 period was this point in time. This was also the calculated range when I measured the duration it took between here, and it was also the midpoint that we just measured between that 56-minute, whatever that time frame was. So there was a lot of confluence with that 3:14 period, okay? This was the midpoint between this area here. This was the 75% time interval, and it's also the 50% time interval between this wider duration that we looked at here, between 2:45 and 4:08. And then we have these odds in here. Can more of you vote, please? Only 3 people voted? That's pretty crazy. So I would say if they can't even get back to even 07 during this time interval here, then odds are that they're going to keep this probably pretty stuck, okay? If they can get back to at least 07 though, they could still give those odds of those late day breaks, but maybe like into the close, okay? That would be like during this period here. I think that they keep this pretty stuck, but that's just my opinion. Because this is basically the balance zone area that they're holding. Apple holding pretty nicely off 297.61. Same thing with Apple, it's kind of still stuck in between 297.61 and 299.10. Apple's structure looks really, really good, actually. And I don't have this level marked on Apple, but I mean, I guess we could mark this as like a midpoint. I don't have it marked, but maybe in between here. Do you see this? What is that spot? 296.36. You could mark that. That's the 50% range between my calculated spots on Apple. So we could mark this as a new area on Apple. It's not really new. It's kind of just like the midpoint, but I'll just mark this as 50% range between 295.10 and 297.61. So these are very structured holds here on Apple today, okay? I don't know who wants this in here, but I do have to leave right at 2 today because I have to go downtown and I have to be somewhere by 4, so. I'm just gonna reset some alerts here on Tesla. Some individual names are holding a little bit better. But this is very expected with ES in these ranges here. I'm just looking to see the total range reduction before, like after 314, but before 325.27 is so far 15 points. So this basically tells you, do you see that? Like right around that 74.13. Like they had some odds of trying to retest highs or even that 14 during this period, but that reduction in range is that exact theory that I'm thinking, where they keep this kind of stuck on the session today. But we'll see if they at least try reopening some odds during the imbalance period. Otherwise, we're back at that risk of 7.378, 7.371, 7.375. They'd have to basically do something similar to what they did here. Otherwise, here's the retest here right off that 325. These are some calculated midpoints that I had measured earlier, specifically off a stall of like 73.99. So it kind of just puts this range basically back at risk. I think this is what would limit, like I said, the odds for today's session on both sides, because they're kind of tagging the minimum range of like the 9995, but then still not breaking high enough around 04, 05, 07, 11, but still also holding off like 54, 61, 71. That kind of keeps it stuck in between. So we'll see if they can try holding off 73, 77. What is that? I just want to see if there's some extended time frames. I know we looked at the 55, but I wanted to see if there were some that maybe off like an hourly. Let me just see. That had some extensions or something like that for some of these bear structures. I would imagine maybe off like a 70-minute or something. But I just want to check. Yeah, like this one here. This is 371. This one doesn't flip till 336. This one doesn't flip till 415. So this one's obviously some risk. This one's actually really clean because that's like right off those lower highs. This is a nice one. This doesn't flip until 332. So this kind of still shows you that risk back beneath like 73, 71, 75, 78. All right, what do you guys think? This is a pretty important period, especially for like the imbalance, but also some calculated times here. The flips that I had were 336 and 332, but some of the midpoints that I had marked, I'm just going to mark the actual flips in black. The midpoints were that 328. So the 328 is that 55-minute, I think that flips over. No, not the 55, sorry, the 56? I think it was a 56. This one here. This is linked to low of day. Okay. So this is linked to here. 25 was calculated. So what do you think? This is basically the exact same period as this period here. Do you think that they try holding the line again? So basically a 73. The difference this time is you'd have to do what? What would you have to do different this time? Because like I said last time, I don't think it was high enough with 8-8, especially here. What do you think you'd have to do this time? I'll set that to 2 minutes. Well, no, because we're resetting the conditions, Mose, right? So what were the conditions that we said back here that we had to do? You guys always either like underestimate or overestimate. Yeah, a proper 95-50 clearance, exactly. Okay, so this is the same sort of window that we had back in here, okay? So you probably need to get at least back to here. Otherwise, it's going to be that same sort of risk, okay? So 328 getting back to 8750, so same sort of idea that they did back at 3. Basically retraced real-time OR. The actual structural flips today are 332 and 336. So and if they hold a second low here, okay, then I would think that they have some odds of like staying within the balance zone, right? What's the balance zone? Or the area that kind of just keeps things balanced ahead of tomorrow. And this is what can keep us back and forth and like basically stuck until NVIDIA earnings. So this is the extended area of risk. This is that reward. Not reward, I guess I would say. Around opening range. No, opening range is like what? Real-time opening range? Or session opening range? I'd say closer to like 73.95, 73, 99, 74.02, 74. Oh, basically the neutral zone, okay? This area here, that's the area that's balanced, basically, where it's beneath 74.21, okay, beneath, but above 73.88, 73.90. Does that make sense? It's basically neutral zone bound, like, so bear neutral, okay, to like neutral, but it doesn't break any of the neutral ranges, okay? Does that make sense? Above 9394, you're bear neutral, right? This area here is bear neutral. So neutral, 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 bull neutral. We opened the week at 74.10. We closed the week at 74.18. That was bull neutral, neutral. Okay? They bring it back to this area here, that's bear neutral. So it doesn't really, obviously 9495 does not help, but it's still that neutralized balance zone, and they happen to be calculated ranges this time, so that helps with our 100-point theory because it makes sense that those would be like the neutralized areas. So here we go, 73.88 being retested here off that 232 period. We'll see if they can clear this back at least over like 90, 91. I wanted to see if they can at least retest 9495, specifically around that 336 period, because that would have been more ideal to have happened around that 305 window, which they just didn't do. Otherwise, it's going to keep us at risk of 73, 71 retest. I think the midpoint here is going to be very important too, around 3435. But these were my thoughts. This is what I figured they could do into the close, is basically just take it back to this balanced zone where I think they would maybe avoid core breaks, but they would also avoid core breaks below. So that helps them avoid 7420s, but it also helps them avoid 7370s, if that makes sense. So far, risk is still on, though, that this isn't high enough for them to avoid back testing this in the last like 10-15 minutes. And this is the exact kind of PA that I mentioned on the report too, that we'd probably have happen today. So the most important aspects of this week, like I said when we started the Sunday session, is them opening us in this range basically just kind of keeps things, and also where they stalled last week, okay? Slower grind, usually two-directional PA, a lot of recycled ranges, repeated retests, which we've seen happen a lot, balanced structures, okay? This is exactly how PA has been trading this week. So that's why I feel like they're probably going to keep this around this balance zone area, but obviously we'll have to see. The risk beneath would be taking us back beneath 73.37, 73.38 to back to 73.20s. Because we have to get into a zoner channel before tomorrow either way, right? So if we're getting to a zoner channel before tomorrow, we have to be either in this zone in this channel, which is 73.88 to 74.32, 74.38, 74.44, 48, or this channel, which is back to last week's retest, 73.33, 73.36, 73.44, 73.48. Does that make sense to you guys? Or potentially back to the area that we haven't digested, which is the 73.20s. There's no way that they'll keep this in this area here. It's going to have to break one end or another. So them keeping it stuck right here. The reason why I say that this isn't really the best area is because it kind of keeps both areas in place. So let's say off of 4849, and let's say off of 7288, which is the next zone. Do you see how this is kind of like right in between? Like this doesn't really do anything for us, okay? Off 7320. Do you see how it's kind of like right around where they opened today? Okay, off 73.38, 74.38 and 73.20, 73.79. Do you see how this is like right in between both sides? This doesn't really do anything for us. If anything, this kind of just keeps things very conflicted, okay? Between the undigested area here, the calculated zone or channel area here, around 7336, 3738, because it's basically this range in here, okay? And between 2-1. Does that make sense? So where they're keeping the stuck right here, this is like them keeping it right in between. So if we want to measure off where they actually stalled and where they closed, do you see how this area here, 73.80, would be linked to 73.20 on that 74.40 stall? Okay, so that's what could put us at risk basically of getting back there. That's why we would need at least over 8.8 to avoid that. Okay, or at least over 9.596. Do you see how 9.596 avoids going back beneath 73.36, 38 if they can get us back there? Okay, whereas like this area here still kind of keeps that risk on. Around the 20 range, 21 range. 7.2 gives us still those odds of retesting 73.20s. 8.1 gives us odds of 73.37, 38. 8.8 again gives us odds of holding the 50s and getting back to 70. Do you see what I'm saying, you guys? So like as long as they can keep it around 8.7, 8.8, there's still some odds of a 74.21 retest and a 73.50s hold. Whereas like the lower they keep this, which currently they're more closer to like this area here. Do you see? Which is why they're trying to hold off like 8.1, 8.2, okay, into the close. So our best bet to avoid those 20s and 30s zone is we need back over 9.596. That'll at least give us an odd of getting back into this channel and holding the 50s. Okay? Or obviously over 9.9, 7,400. That's going to give us an odd of getting back to the channel. The best odds is going to be obviously over 74.04. 05, 08, basically that neutralized range. That'll give us odds of getting back into the channel and maybe retesting 74.54. But I just want you guys to see how we have two zones, two channels, they're stuck in between, okay? So two zones. This should be red. Okay, two channels and they're stuck in between. 73, 87, 88, 74, 32. Okay. And this is the area we have yet to digest. These are our calculated spots at 5.4. This is the channel area that we haven't digested yet, okay? Between here. Okay. Do you see what they're doing? And then last week's lows from these sessions in here are linked back to here. Okay, so do you see how they're trying to avoid that, but then they also tag that, but then they're kind of like right in between right here, okay? This area here is the spot that we haven't digested yet, between 14, 21, 28. This is basically 50% of our range is in this area here, okay? And typically before major catalyst, we're usually in a zoner channel, so them keeping it in this area here doesn't really do anything for us. CL retesting here too. XOM just broke. I just got an alert on my broker. 162.69 being taken out here on XOM into the close. I was looking to see if they would trigger 163.57. So far that's looking pretty likely on XOM if anyone's trading that one with me. Whereas ES is clearly stalling and backtesting these ranges, which is keeping that risk on until close to these areas in here after a failed structural break off these periods. So they either have to try holding the line, okay, before the close, specifically off like that 350, 354, 355, those are generic times. We had the highest odds today after the bell anyway. Or take it back to like this neutralized zone, which is, again, back in this area in here. What do you guys think? Where do you think they close this today? There's obviously a lot of confluence around the 73, 80, 81, 78 because that's 50% of the range, but like we were just talking about, but I don't really think that does anything for us. Like if they close it around these areas here, I don't really think this is going to do anything for us. This, if anything, that just makes it so the 73.20s could be retested, okay? Because it's like a stuck core range, okay? Which core could still trigger downside, especially if you never triggered core upside. So in this case scenario would be basically them not triggering 74.20s could re-trigger 73.20s. Does that make sense to you guys? That's like one way of thinking about it, is like them not triggering this area here could re-trigger this area here, okay? The neutralized way would be is if they close it close to 88.90, because they did technically test 20s last night in 3.8 and 5.4. That would just kind of keep it back in this neutralized range in here between 74.10, 74.08, 74.05, 73.99. So what do you guys think? Where do you think they're going to close this? Let's do a poll. 73, back to 73.54, 73.58, 73.61, back to 73, 71, 73, 76, 73, 78, back to 73, 80, 73, 83, 73, 86. This would be like the flat close. 7388 to 7394, 7394 to 7399, 7410. I think those are only really the three options. I don't really think they could close it anywhere other than those spots here. This is for real-time close, by the way. Can you guys vote on that, please? Today's close is very, very, very important. We have multiple flips that flip over tomorrow, so the closing price today matters a lot, okay? So this is the 8-day flip, this is the 4th bar. And on that 8-day too, you can kind of see that structural support at 7352. Do you guys see that? And then the 7410 high. That's not a coincidence, by the way, okay? Because this is linked with this week. So look at that. Okay, these are linked with this week, so it's not a coincidence that they're literally opening the session there for the week, okay, at 74.10, and they're also backtesting 73.52, okay? That's why I'm saying if they end up closing in between, that doesn't really do anything for us. Okay, this kind of just makes it, like, do you see what I'm saying? If they close this around 81, 80, that doesn't really change anything. Can I get more votes than just one person, please? So that we can at least have an idea of like your overall thoughts on this. So them closing it right where they are, right back at OR, it just kind of keeps things stuck. Because that's like right in between, okay? You need breaks over 74, 10, 11, obviously, and you need structural breaks beneath 5, 2, 5, 4, which we're already aware of. What time is it? So I want to see maybe by our end of session intervals if they, I would say if they can try getting back to 73.88 by like 354, 55, then they have an odd to pin in here. If they keep it beneath that, then they're probably just going to pin these core ranges around like 8.1, 8.6, basically pin the session flat where we open today. Anything over 9.5 I think would be good for a 74.21, 74.11 retest overnight or something. This area here, like I said, it keeps odds alive for 50s and it keeps odds alive for 74.10. So that can keep two directional odds open if they keep it in these 80s here. Okay. So we'll see what they do probably by the 348 to 349 just to see if they at least can retag opening range or something maybe by 350. Where's the opening range? Otherwise, that risk I think is still on for this range to get retested. I still think they're going to keep this stuck though, or they would avoid both sides. XOM still getting a really good clearance break here. 163.57 was my target on XOM for the session today, with slight odds of 164.47, 164.73. I didn't really think that we could get the 164, but sometimes XOM could be a late day pusher and often pushes into the close. So, and this is pushing on relatively good volume here too. Okay, poll's coming to a close here, so we'll see. Highest votes is 73 to 893. That's what I voted for too. I feel like if they can hold off like 7.5, 7.8, 8.1 before 350, and then at least get back to today's open off 350 like here, then we have some decent odds of at least closing in here. I don't know if we can get back over 9.4, 9.5 though, like into the close, like to 9.9. We'll have to see. Second place was 73.94. Third was also some think that they could bring it back to 7.354, 5.8. The only reason I didn't vote for that is because they did still technically retract 73.88 here, and they still held 7.9, 7.3, 7.8 back in here, and they're still holding off 7.5. Okay, plus they also tested 73.99. That's why I figured there's probably some odds they keep it within this area here into the close, but we'll have to see specifically what the 350 stick does, if it holds 7.1 and tries getting back over like 8.6, or if they reduce range. I figure they'd have to get back here by 54, 55, not 350, but mainly if they fail 7.1, because this is the area that increases risk, is 7.1. So far they tested 7.2, 7.5. Tesla getting single sticks here into the close. So this is the area that will increase odds. This is the area that can increase risk beneath, I would say 7-1, because that's what can open up the window to 6-6. And then keeping it in between here just basically keeps both ends alive for like the 50s and 74.04 to 74.10. Okay, I'm going to mute myself here, guys, for the last 10 minutes. I just want to focus a bit on some of my other positions. It is pretty interesting too that the 350 stick, if you look at it, was exactly at that 7376, 7378, which has been obviously a pretty big overhead for the entire session. Okay, that's kind of like that area of risk. So they kept it like just a tiny bit above, but barely, which is what can re-trigger 6-6, but can still give odds of retesting 8-6. So it's kind of like they kept it right in between. I think that 54-55 period here is kind of what's going to set the tone into the close. It seems like they might want to close this around these core areas to keep odds two directional until tomorrow. There's a 73.66 retest after stalling 7.576. This is what can reopen that probability for 5.461. Specifically, I would say if they don't retrace 7.6 off the 5.556 windows. And XOM still pushing here into the close off 163. 163.57 is my target on this one for the session today. We'll see if it actually triggers. Apple holding though, which is interesting. So Apple's trying to hold off. Tesla kind of stuck. Yes, right off the 6-6. We'll have to see if 5-6 can retract. I still think that they'll pin these core areas though, but we'll see. Especially since they're like the 50% ranges. Like if they really want to screw over both sides, they'll probably try keeping it stuck, but also interesting that Apple was holding too. How much time do we have left? 3 minutes. This would be the area that would. So remember, these are the areas that are kind of like the midpoints, okay? That kind of still keep odds open for pretty much both sides, okay? Like if they bring it back to this range in here, okay? This is what could still keep odds for like 73.20s. Do you see what I'm saying? And 74.20s. It kind of keeps it like stuck on both ends. If they bring it closer to 80, that'll give higher odds of like avoiding a break of like 36, 73, 30, 36, 41. So 70s aren't terrible, but they still can give odds of 73.20s. 73.80s aren't terrible, but they can also still give odds of 73.30s and 40s. So this is the final minute here. 73, 74 being retested here. We'll see if they can break. So the first area they'd probably have to break would be 7.8. And then we'll see if they pin the close flat around 8.6. There were some odds today at 4 and 4:08 p.m. after the bell. And then at 4:24. So I would say for them to get this back into this neutralized zone for the actual session close, they probably need at least over 8.1, 8.3 by 3:59, and probably over 8.6, 8.8 by 4. Okay, so we'll see how much time is left here. So this is if they pin the close flat, which is what I figured they could do, and then maybe try pushing back 9.88 to 9.3 at 4 o'clock. So 7.8 isn't a terrible close, but again, like I said, it still keeps odds open for both ends. Okay, I have to go right away, guys, but honestly, this is still keeping us in a very neutralized state. Like I said, it doesn't really increase probability for either end. It keeps both sides active. So 73.20s, 73.30s still active, and 74.20s, 74.30s still active. Like both sides kind of remain in play with a pin in the 70s in here, okay? So that end of day last minute break, I would say that only if they can get it back to this area here, okay, by end of session, like for the actual session close, would be the only way they could retest upside first. Otherwise, I still think that this area remains at risk, and visuals are still posted on Substack if you guys need to go back and refer to it. So, all right, I'll catch you guys tomorrow. It's honestly up to you if you want a report tonight or tomorrow. I'm good with either or. I think we know our risk reward right now. It's kind of like still that whole two-directional theme. They could literally take it down to 73 20s and 30s and still bring it back up anyway to end the week flat. Like, so it doesn't really make a difference. This is kind of the theme for the week this week. Okay,